Hello and welcome to the Washington Times Politically Unstable. I'm Kelly Sadler, the commentary editor here at the Washington Times. And today I'm joined by Daniel Turner, the founder and executive director of Power the Future. He has written a column for us regarding Bill Gates' about face when it comes to his climate agenda. Bill Gates has been saying that the world is going to end because of global warming, that generations will die. There will be a demise. And recently he backtracked on those comments, basically saying that global warming will not lead to humanity's demise, his words, and that there is no doomsday risk to global warming. Why this about face, this U turn right now, Daniel?
Yeah, it's a remarkable U-turn. I mean, you just use the phrase doomsday. There's an actual doomsday clock. King Charles started it. He was still Prince Charles at the time, but he actually activated it, and we're in backwards countdown mode of the end of times. And so for someone like Bill Gates, who really has been one of the leaders of the climate movement to come out and reverse this, makes you realize something else has to be going on. And I think if you're someone like Bill Gates and you're incredibly smart, and you see a couple of moves in the future, you realize that not only is the climate movement not the new it thing to protest, but that the climate movement is actually hampering a lot of the technologies that he wants to get online: data centers, artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
There's a lot of power right now in the energy space, about political power. We see this administration, which is talking about drill baby drill, and permitting and fracking and pipelines, and opening up America offshore and Alaska, etc. So if you're Bill Gates, your fingers on the pulse and you're thinking to the future, you realize that this is now the new opportunity. It's not climate, and so it's not really for him an about face as much as it is for him a strategic pivot.
So, are you telling me this was never about saving humanity from our climate's demise? There was really never any virtue in getting on this bandwagon for Bill Gates?
I feel bad in saying that, yes, because I don't want to demoralize anyone who thought that Bill was looking out for the best of humanity. But you look at the book that he wrote about the climate crisis. It was navigating the climate crisis, or how to survive the climate crisis. And it came out very early in the Biden administration, early 2021. And in that book, he lays out a plan which basically sounds like an application for government grants. We need green funding of this. We need green funding of that. We need green funding for upstarts. Bill Gates makes butter out of carbon dioxide. I would never eat it, but it's readily available, right? He makes meat out of lab grown things, and he wanted money for that. And someone like Bill Gates, he's not going to use his own money. He'll get government grants for that. I mean, billionaires are billionaires for a reason. So the timing of his climate enthusiasm very conveniently coincided with the outset of a Biden administration, which pledged billions, if not trillions, of dollars in the climate space. And now there's a new sheriff in town, and Bill Gates wants to be part of his posse.
But Daniel, you say in your piece, and you mention in your piece, even though Bill Gates has done this U turn, he still is giving millions of dollars to these nonprofits that want to get government money. As much as Donald Trump has promised to come
Yeah.
in and clean the swamp, it's really hard to clean the entire bureaucratic establishment that has bought into this, climate change hysteria. And there's still many people working within the bureaucracy that believe in it, and grants that have been going out.
Absolutely, and this is, I think, a very awful part of American political philanthropy, which is almost you see it a little bit on the left, but it probably exists on the right as well. And it's this sort of extortion, to put it bluntly. If we accuse an organization of X, we're going to mobilize our activists against you unless you write us a check. Jesse Jackson and the Rainbow Push Coalition are often the best examples of this, right? We will call you a racist company unless you start writing us checks. The climate movement does this very well. Right? There's a reason why back when Greta was one of the leading climate activists before she decided like hating Israel
Sort
was
of
more fun. Yeah,
pro-Hamas, yeah,
exactly. The new it thing, right? The new climate thing. But there was a reason why certain companies were never the focus of her wrath, and those companies knew to write enough checks to keep people off their backs, to keep people out of their boardrooms and from throwing bricks through their company's windows. And so it's smart for Bill Gates. Again, the guy's worth of $200 billion or something shy of that. So a couple $1,000,000 here and there to keep people, quite frankly, at bay is just a smart investment. And that's, sadly, we see a lot of that in politics. You know, right? I will send my minions after you unless you pay me enough money, and then I'll stop.
Well, Daniel, one of the real harms of this, and actually Kamala Harris has spoken about this on her book tour, is that a lot of the younger generation really bought into this hysteria. And they're refusing to have children because they're scared to have children, not knowing what sort of environment their children will be brought up in. There is a whole counterculture, people who never really read the science, if you will, because there's a lot of science out there that debunks what all of these climate preachers have said. I mean, how many times have we been told that the world is going to end in 10 years, that the polar ice caps are going to melt and submerge New York City? None of these prophecies have come true, but a lot of the younger generation has bought into that, and Bill Gates has been one of the proponents of this.
And this is why I started my organization and why I'm active in this space. It's fun to make fun of the climate people and call out their hypocrisy and battle them in the public square about the science or the parts per million or whatever. But in my heart of hearts, I believe that the leaders of the climate movement and the climate movement itself is deeply misanthropic. It's genuinely evil. The damage it does to people, to communities. These are not good people who just care about the earth. These are very, very bad people who use climate change as a means to seize power. And the reason why I give that backgrounder is because when you look at what they have done to children, there is no forgiving that. And the vice president, the former vice president, is right. Climate anxiety is a serious problem in this country, but it's a serious problem because evil adults have poisoned the minds of children and have them believe that there is a boogeyman under their bed and that they are going to die from it. And that is a level of sickness that you see in the political left. And that is something the political left is unique. They have scared their kids into being transgender. They've scared their kids into being violent, and now they've scared them into thinking the planet is going to end any minute. And so there is no forgiveness of that. And that's why I got off the sidelines and started my organization to somewhat battle the people like Bill Gates, who will always have the upper hand because they have billions of dollars, but they are bad, bad people, and they need to be called out.
Well, it's almost become a religion to the left.
It is.
And it's, because I was born and raised in a Baptist household, I was like, us humans don't really have control over our environment. We can be good stewards of our environment, but it is ultimately God who has the control here. Whereas, a lot of the climate alarmists believe man has the control and really can alter the direction of the environment, and that's just really not true, is it?
No, there's very little humans can do, and that's the point of the climate argument. They posit it when I testify before Congress, right? The simplest question is, do you believe climate change is real? And that's not really the question they want to know. They believe, to what extent is humanity affecting the climate? And that is not a true or a false or a yes or a no. It's an inductive argument. So if you know your Aristotle, right, it's on a spectrum of strong to weak. And I think it's a very weak argument. I don't think human activity is impacting. Some people think that human activity is deeply impacting, and it's a strong argument. And that's where debate has to happen. But for what we put into the atmosphere, for what humans do on this planet, the idea that we can control any aspect of the weather is just laughable. Case in point, go back to articles in March and April of this year. Every climate expert was predicting an above average hurricane season, and they cited water temperature, and they cited the El Nino, and all sorts of nonsense. We didn't have one major hurricane impact the United States. Not one. Terrible one hit Jamaica, of
Mhm.
course, but but that was it. And how come they couldn't remotely predict that? So yeah, humans, what we can do to this planet, of course, we have to be good stewards of it. But what we have on this planet that God has given us are the resources to make human life better, more dignified, more free, more prosperous. And the people who have the least amount of fossil fuels have the worst condition. They have the worst human rights. They have the worst sanitary and hygiene. They have the least amount of freedom. So fossil fuels are intimately tied to human dignity, and that's why we fight for them so aggressively at Power the Future.
Can you talk to me about the origins of this climate hysteria? Um, I mean, I recall it kind of starting with Al Gore. That's the first time it became mainstreamed.
Mm.
Growing up, I was really never concerned about that. It was just something that started infiltrating the education system when I was in high school and college.
Yeah, and I think this is just being in this political space for as I said to say as many decades now as I've been in, 30 years or so doing the political stuff. I think if you are on the institutional, ideological, academic left, if you're a deep Marxist at heart, you are always looking for the opportunity to push your beliefs, and you need a catalyst. I think there's a very, very intimate relationship between the end of the Cold War and the rise of the climate movement, because they needed to channel their control fantasies into something else. And clearly, socialism wasn't working. Of course, they get the luxury of saying, well, that wasn't real socialism, right? I'm in New York City right now, which is actually where I was born and raised, and my whole family lives. After a year of Mamdani, they'll say the same thing, right? That wasn't real socialism. Um, but when the communist movement failed, the climate movement began, and granted, there's some a little bit before 1989, 1988, but it really took root because the left, which loves control and domination, needs a purpose. It's why for a very little short period of time during COVID, we saw the exact same mentality the climate movement uses in the COVID movement. There was denial. There was no alternative viewpoints were allowed. There was silencing people as disinformers or misinformers. There were remedies that didn't work, right? We say we need to burn coal to make solar panels to save the earth, and you scratch your head and say that doesn't make sense. The same people said you have to wear a mask, right? And this will stop the spread. And you're like, that doesn't make sense. Doesn't matter. It doesn't make sense. We are going to force you to follow these stupid rules and spend money because we are the ones in charge, and you will obey or you will get locked up. So I think the origin of the climate left is deeply rooted in Marxism, which is deeply rooted in the desire to have control over people, their movements, their actions, their agency, their autonomy, etc.
So, why do you think it's changing now? You touched upon this a little bit in the beginning of our conversation, the move to AI, the future that that's going to bring. Of course, AI is heavily dependent on the utility grid, and is pushing up costs for a lot of consumers here in the States in order to be able to support that. But in order to be able to support that growth, we're going to need more fossil fuels, and we're going to need them to be brought online fast. So is this just an opportunistic move from the left? I mean, with Bill Gates in particular, would you identify him as a Marxist or a capitalist at heart?
I think he uses capitalism, but I think he's probably he's probably like a classic fascist that I will use the means of business and economies, but ultimately I want control over people, and that's why he very much pushes things about the bugs and these beef patties made from ground up. He wants to control what people eat. It's why he's very influential in the EV decisions, because he wants to control how people move. It's why he was so caught up in COVID also. Remember, we would see him all the time in COVID conversations, and he would speak in the royal we. We are looking at a new vaccine, which we think, and no one ever stopped him and said, I'm sorry, like not only who elected you, but why the hell do you think you know anything about vaccines? Well, the climate is the exact same thing. He will give speeches on world stages and tell people what he thinks people should do. Um, since he is someone who deeply wants control, because look, he has enough money, right? Money is no longer attractive. AI, I think for him is the ultimate control. And I think it is an exciting control that has someone like him salivating at night. When you think in a couple years, AI, or maybe even sooner, AI can be to the point that on every person and every device around the world in real time, you can feed them information. We can do that now with ads, right? And some little
Mhm.
banner messages, but you can be manipulating people's feeds. You can be changing facts in real time. You can be changing truth in real time. Let alone what you can do to the human genome. Let alone what you can do to, etc. That's a power that people like him who are smart enough to understand. He says, "I want that. I want that more than anything else," and so he's gonna throw over the climate movement to get it.
I mean, that's horrifying because we know AI is the future. Most of us have been told to get on board or be left out.
Mm,
But we know that AI is really only good as where it gets its inputs from.
yeah,
And we've seen a lot of models like ChatGPT. Elon Musk has his, and he's trying to protect its biases, but it still is shoving out lines from communists, from Marxists,
yep.
from the leftist ideology as fact when you put in searches, and really does discriminate against conservative thought.
Absolutely. And there was an example of this not too long ago, very recently. And it was, I believe, a Washington Post reporter, could have been New York Times, who was writing a story about the Trump ballroom and used the line that Mamie Eisenhower said it was the heart and soul of the nation. And every AI algorithm, every chat GPT, everyone picked up on that. But then someone said, well, there's no evidence Mamie Eisenhower ever said that. And basically it was like, yeah, we kind of made up that quote, but now, if you Google, did Mamie Eisenhower XXX? The answer is yes. So, how many kids were told to go home that night and write a story about why Trump is destroying the heart and soul of the nation? And they Google heart and soul, and boom, that is now the truth. Doesn't matter if the quote was made up by a reporter. That is now the truth, according to ChatGPT. Another fun example, which you and all your wonderful listeners can play at home: ask Google if X country is warming faster than the global average. I've done this with over 100 countries, and the answer is yes. Whole continents: North America, South America, Asia, Europe, Africa, the regions, the Caribbean, the Arctic, the Middle East. Yes, 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 yes. It's scientifically impossible that everywhere is warming faster than the global average. But if you ask AI, every country is warming faster than the global average. Why? Because it's lies. But it's not a lie if you're a 13-year-old kid told to
Mhm.
go home and do a study and write about what countries are warming faster than the global average. And now that kid grows up to be a climate hysteric because of the lies that have been fed to him. That's again the power that Bill Gates wants, not just about climate, but about everything, because that is the ultimate power.
So, Daniel, what can we do to fight back against this? I know that you founded, Power of the Future, that is trying to redirect this information and take it head on, but providing alternate sources of facts. But what can we do to protect our children? Because obviously, the Gen Z has been dramatically affected by the climate hysteria, and just the fact that they don't want to get married or have children.
Yeah.
But what can we do as individuals to protect our children from this, as well as be able to know what we're reading is actually true?
Yeah, if I was a leftist, I would say pay more taxes, right? And that will solve. That's how we solve climate change, right? Right? Pay a carbon
More
tax, and
misinformation boards funded by the federal government to censor and call out people who don't agree with us. Yeah.
the most important thing you can do, especially if you are a parent, and we saw this during COVID, is know what your kids are being taught at school. I think a very important thing you can do also is celebrate America and American prosperity with your kids. Right? I call when I give speeches, especially on high school and college groups, I call fossil fuels the great equalizer, because if you've ever watched a show like Downton Abbey or the Gilded Age, you see the disparity of the haves and the have-nots
Mhm.
was insane. But fossil fuels, which came around that time those shows were filmed, began to equalize things so much so that like my iPhone is no worse than the richest people in the world. Right? Elon Musk may have more. He may have more flat screens, but he watches the same shows I can get my fingers on. You know, when Bill Gates flies private to Paris, it's probably a nicer hotel and a nicer plane. But when he stands under the Eiffel Tower, you and I can stand under the same Eiffel Tower, right? And it's not impossible. Fossil fuels has equalized humanity. I think it's also why people like Bill Gates hate them, because they don't want an equal humanity. They want separate. People like John Kerry don't want equality, right? I'm John Kerry. I don't want to be in the same world with the rest of you. So the best way to fight it is to celebrate the abundance that we have in a really healthy and celebratory way, right? The simplest thing, like I thought about growing up as a kid, my mom used to make us watch Little House on the Prairie as a family and quiz us on it to show us how crappy life was,
Mhm.
right? On the prairie. Do stuff like that with your kids, and to talk about the fact that, like, did you ever draw water from a well? I always ask this with kids because I have a farm, even though I'm in New York City right now. I do have a farm in Shenandoah, Virginia, right? I ask, who's ever drawn water from a well? You know how miserable it is to draw water from a well, right? Those are the things you can do with your kids and show them how great life is because of these things. And they're not destroying the planet. What they're destroying is elitism. What they're destroying is separation of classes. And celebrate that as much as possible, because then your kids are never going to want to give it up. Tiniest little example: your kid's gaming device uses more electricity than anything in your house, unless you have a heated pool, right? Your gaming device uses more than your refrigerator. It uses more than the microwave. You got a 12-year-old kid who comes home petrified of climate change. Tell him, Billy boy, I think we should shut off your Xbox for the climate. See how he responds, right? And he will no longer be a collective sacrificer that we should do something when it becomes his personal sacrifice. Bring it down to the personal level and say, now you realize you're being, fed a bunch of bunk, and then Billy will realize.
Well, Daniel Turner, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I appreciate your time.
You got it. Thank you.